Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Bedroom Spice Unfiltered. I'm your host, Deshawn Phillips. If you guys are new here, this is where we have the real, raw, unfiltered conversations about dating, relationships, sex, and everything people think but scared to say out loud. So, if you guys like a little honesty, controversy, and if y'all like stuff that might hit a nerve, but actually make you think, I want y'all to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and stay tuned in because we got a lot to cover over here with these hot topics. Now, this topic here is something that a lot of us deal with, have dealt with, and probably will deal with. This one is they didn't change, they just stopped pretending. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't really like to hear because, well, especially like when you're fresh out of something, or you're still trying to make sense of it. Sometimes we tend to think that somebody changed, right? When actually they didn't change, they just stopped pretending. And I know that might sound harsh to a little bit of y'all, but when you really think about how somebody was in the beginning versus how they ended up, it feels like two completely different people, right? Like you met one version of a person and then somewhere down the line, they turned into, or we think they turned into somebody else. And that's what we as people tend to hold on to. That beginning version of who that person was, that sweet version, that consistent version of that person. We tend to hold on to the version of that person that made us feel chosen, seen, or wanted. But a lot of times that wasn't the full them. That was just a cover up. That was the version of them that they knew how to get you. And I'm going to be honest, like I used to be the type, okay, still probably to this day, but I mean, I'm a little bit more cautious and aware now because I have been through, a lot and I've seen a lot of things. But sometimes, or I used to say a lot that, oh, that person changed on me, or I used to really believe the things that that person told me, or that person changed because that's not the person they were when I met them. But when you really, really, really start to pay attention, you begin to notice things. Like if you really go back to the beginning, the signs were always there. Those flags, red flags were always there. They just be small to where you barely notice them. They be subtle. Those signs be easy to overlook because everything else feels good, right? Yeah, they were texting you all day. They were calling you, staying on the phone with you all day. But then there were moments where that would disappear. Yes, they were consistent, but they were consistent only when it was convenient for them. Yes, they were sweet, but they had little small hints of inconsistency, like those little hints of selfishness, those little moments where something just fell off. But we as human beings ignore it, right? Because we tend to focus on how that person makes us feel in that moment. We focus on the attention, the energy, the connection. So it's like we tell ourselves that those small red flags is not that much of a big deal. But the whole time, that was who they really were. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't temporary. It was just a part of them that was not being fully shown yet. And that's what we as people tend to struggle with. We struggle to accept that because it feels better to believe that somebody changed than to admit that we didn't see who they were fully in the first place. Because if that person changed, that means that what you had was real and something just went wrong. But what if they didn't change? What if it means that what you saw in the beginning wasn't the full truth, right? Now we have to sit there and admit to ourselves that we fell for the version that they presented, but not the person that they always were. And let's be real, in the beginning, we as people, right, tend to be on our best behavior because we're trying to capture the person that we want, right? So we're gonna put on an image, right? We're gonna put on an image. We're gonna put on a costume, basically, right? A cover up, right? So that person doesn't see the real us. But everybody is just showing you their highlight reel. Everybody is putting in effort, right? Everybody's saying the right things. They doing the right things, being attentive, being present, only because they're trying to win you over, right? They're trying to lock you in. They're trying to create that emotional connection. But once that person feels like they have you, that's when you're going to start seeing them true colors. And it's not because they turned into somebody else. It's not because they no longer, it's because they're no longer trying to hard to maintain that version of who they pretended to be. And then that's when we start to say, oh, you changed, right? But they didn't change. The truth is, they just relaxed. They got comfortable. They just stopped putting on an act. They stopped performing because they got you hooked already. And now you're seeing them without that extra effort and without the mask and without the pressure to impress you. That version is who they really are. Now, I'm not saying that people don't grow or change at all, because let's be honest, most of the time, people don't switch up overnight like that. Okay? They don't switch up overnight. But what you're seeing is a gradual reveal. You're seeing those outer layers come off. You're seeing consistency or you're seeing inconsistency, right? Start to show. You're seeing patterns that were always there. They're just more visible now, right? Those small little problems that we saw in the beginning, they're just becoming bigger now. Like you're really, really, really starting to see it. And the problem is by the time you see it clearly, it's too late. Why? Because you already attached. They got you. They hooked you. You already invested. You've already built something in your head about who you think they were or they are. So now, instead of accepting what you're seeing, you start comparing it to who they were in the beginning. And you start to say, oh, I just want the old you back. But what if that old them was never sustainable, right? What if that was just a version of them that required effort that they couldn't maintain long term? Because that's another thing that people don't talk about. Some people cannot keep up the version of themselves that they showed you in the beginning. How many of y'all went through that? How many of y'all know somebody like, I'm sure we all then came across somebody like that. That level of consistency, communication, attention, all that was just temporary. And it's not because they planned it that way necessarily, right? That's not because that's not who they are on a regular basis. That's why that tends to fade. That's why things change. And that's why we start to feel that shift. So instead of us seeing that as clarity, people see it as confusion. But that's not confusion. All that is exposure. You're seeing the truth now. And it doesn't match what you believed before. That's why it hurts us bad. It hurts because we're not just dealing with how they're acting. We're dealing with the realization that the version we fell for isn't who they consistently are. And that's going to have us questioning everything, right? Like, was any of this real? Parts of it were real. The connection might have been real. The moments might have been real. The feelings that you had were definitely real. But consistency, that's what tells you somebody is actually in, right? That's what tells you who somebody actually is. Not the moments, not the words, not the beginning, but consistency. If somebody cannot consistently show up for you the way they did in the beginning, then guess what? The beginning version was not the true baseline. Once you understand that, it's going to change how you look at everything. Because now, instead of getting attached to how somebody starts, you begin to pay attention to how they maintain. Because I'm going to tell you, anybody can show up strong in the beginning. Anybody. Anybody could be attentive for a short period of time. Anybody could say all the right things when they're trying to win you over. But what happens when things begin to settle? Who are you when things begin to settle? Who are you when you begin to get comfortable? Who are you when there's no pressure to impress anybody anymore? That shows your true colors. That's who you really are. That's the version that you have to accept. Not the potential, not the beginning, not the maybe they'll get back to that. Because a lot of people stay stuck waiting for somebody to return to a version of themselves that wasn't even real to begin with. And that's how we end up holding on for too long. That's how we end up giving chance after chance after chance. And that's how we end up excusing things that we shouldn't be excusing because we're chasing a version of them that doesn't exist consistently. Right? And we all got to learn the hard way. We've all probably learned that the hard way. We got to stop telling ourselves that that person changed and start asking ourselves, did I just not see them clearly in the beginning? And once we begin to question that honestly, everything's going to change because now you're not trying to fix that person. You're not trying to get them back to who they were. We're not trying to recreate the beginning. We're just looking at what's in front of us and deciding if that works for us or not. Right? That's where your power is going to come in at. Not in hoping that they go back to what we thought they were, but in accepting what they're showing us now. Consistency. Right? Now, something that I want to ask y'all is the person that you're attached to or the person that you think changed, did they really change or did they just stop pretending? I want y'all to be honest with the comments. And look, y'all, if y'all are rocking with conversations like this, the real, unfiltered, no sugarcoating topics, make sure y'all hit the subscribe button and stay tapped in with the Bedroom Spice Unfiltered because we have a lot more hot topics coming in. I thank y'all for tuning in. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. And like I said, make sure y'all hit the subscribe button, spread the word. A lot more coming. Thank y'all.